Now, Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to this very special episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. We have Anthrax drummer Charlie Benante, but no, we are not talking Anthrax. We are talking Kiss, but not just any Kiss. We are talking July 25th, 1980, Kiss at the Palladium in New York, the very, very first show with Eric Carr. I was there as an 11-year-old. Charlie was there as, 37-year-old or something. But anyway, he was there, and it's a great story. So we're going to do an hour or half an hour of nothing but one day in the life of Kiss, and Alan Niven on the phone here. Ecstatic. He loves this. It's a favorite topic. Oui. Bonjour, Alain.
Bonjour. You know what? I actually have a little Kiss story for you that you may or may not know that I found quite delightful.
Go. I'm listening. I'm waiting for the shoe to drop.
Here comes the shoe. Bob Dylan is obviously one of my heroes, and I am fascinated
with people who can't sing.
I'm fascinated to find out what I can that exposes, exhibits, and illustrates his personality and character, because I think he's far more grounded, far more humorous than most people realize. And I found this little story where they were out with he hadn't been touring for a long time, and he went out with a thing called Rolling Thunder. And one way or another, this extremely attractive 16-year-old blonde girl got into the mix backstage, and Dylan one day sits her down and says, "Hey, honey, I just wrote a song for you." And he plays on a beat-up piano just like a woman and reduces this gorgeous 16-year-old to tears. Well, the 16-year-old was called Sharon Stone, and then she finds out that he actually wrote it 10 years previous. But she was kind of delighted that Dylan sang that song and dedicated it to her, even though he claimed that he wrote it for her, which I thought was kind of entertaining. But he called her Kiss because she was wearing a Kiss T-shirt. So everywhere that she was backstage, he would look at her and say, "Hey, Kiss, let me play you a song." But Sharon Stone was Kiss to Bob Dylan.
See, that makes sense to me. But here's even more exciting news. In February of 2018, Gene Simmons sat down with the Pulse of Radio to talk about how he wrote a few songs with his hero, Bob Dylan, which ended up on his Vault Gene Simmons release that he sold for $2,000. So there you go. Gene Simmons worked with Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Bob Dylan went to see Kiss in the very early days. He was interested. And another little link there is that if you see any film from the Rolling Thunder tour, you'll see that Bob Dylan is in whiteface. And he got that from watching Gene Simmons put makeup on prior to a gig. He thought it was interesting.
And I will give you this quote from Tommy Thayer, which is Kiss's guitarist. He goes, Gene Simmons wrote a song with Bob Dylan, I'm guessing around 1991. One day I got a call from Gene and he said, "Get a drummer and a keyboard player and meet me at Cherokee Studios at 7 p.m. We're going to record like Bob Dylan." And he goes on to say, Gene was like a kid. There you go.
Well, how about that? We managed to hook from the sublime to the whatever.
Sublimer.
Bob Dylan. We managed to link Bob Dylan to Gene Simmons.
Yes, because Gene is ubiquitous. And he was ubiquitous this night on July 25th, 1980. One of the greatest moments of my time, that summer of 1980, a month before June 9th, 1980, at 11 years old. And I've said this a million times, and I'll keep saying it because bragging is fun. I got to interview Gene, and at the time I said, "Who's the drummer? Who's the new drummer?" And he goes, "We can't tell you, but we have picked somebody." And here, 7 weeks later, I'm at the Palladium, and I'm watching them with Eric Carr. And so, anyway, sit back, enjoy. Here is Anthrax drummer Charlie Benante and myself talking about one of the great moments in rock history. Here's Charlie. We are speaking with Anthrax drummer Charlie Benante, but we are here today to talk Kiss. July 25th, 1980. They played the Palladium in New York City. I was there. Charlie was there. Not together, but we were there. And we're going to geek out on some Kiss history, I guess is the proper term. Bonjour, Charlie. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm always excited to talk about the heyday of Kiss.
Yeah, I mean, nothing is more fascinating than that show. So before we get into our own personal experiences, let me just start with the very sort of basic question. You know, you're a drummer, you were a drummer, you loved Kiss in the 70s. What was it for you when Peter Criss stepped out? I mean, was that like a big loss? Like, oh my God, they're losing the drummer? Or was it more like, all right, well, let's see who's coming up. I'm kind of excited about this. How did you sort of take it on that drumming perspective?
It was twofold because we were losing one of the original members. And the thing about Kiss losing a member, you're losing this identity. You know, Peter Criss, the cat, you know, it was so much more than a bass player from Foghat leaving. You know what I mean? It was Peter Criss. Wow, I studied this guy. I studied his, you know, his drumming and all this stuff. So it became quite a big thing. And then the funny thing, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, you're right, because Kiss, unlike a lot of the other bands, you know, you look at Foreigner and Foghat and all these, they were sort of nameless, faceless, right? You knew Foreigner and you knew Urgent, but you didn't know who the guys, you didn't know, Dennis or whoever. But with Kiss, they branded everything. So now all of a sudden, one of the faces, wasn't going to be on the posters. And that was like, oh, that's what's going on here. So let me just ask you about Peter in that sense. You said you studied Peter. Was he an early influence, or was he one of the guys you eventually got to? Like, who's that one drummer where you just go, oh man, this guy is the guy, and I need to know how he plays? I mean, was it Mitch Mitchell? Was it just Peter? Was it somebody else?
It was a few drummers. Like, I've never been like partial to every drummer, but there was definitely a handful of guys that helped shape the drummer that I was becoming. Peter was definitely one of those guys. I would study his drum solo on a live, and the thing that would always freak me out is I would see pictures of Peter playing two different kits around that time. If you opened up the Alive booklet, it looked like Peter was playing these three massive toms in the front of him, but that was just the angle or a fisheye lens that made them look bigger. But then I would see pictures of him around that time where he was playing these smaller toms that were just kind of single-headed. And I would listen to like bootlegs that I would buy back in the day, on vinyl. One was called Fried Alive, and then one was called Anaheim or Can-Am, whatever. I forget what it was, but and I think
it was Kiss Destroys Anaheim. I think, wasn't it Kiss Destroys Anaheim?
Kiss Destroys, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I had the same bootleg.
It was that one. It was Fried. I love all these bootlegs.
And Takes Tokyo.
Takes Tokyo was I love that one. But Peter's solo was different. It was still great, but it didn't have that alive sound to it where Eddie Kramer put on that like flanger effect on it to just take it to a different level, because without the effect on that solo, it's a drum solo. It's great drum solo. I love the way he splits it into like three parts, but when Eddie put that effect on top of it, it took it to another level.
Oh yeah, it completely did. So all right, so let's get to July 25th. Now, I drove down with my mom from Montreal, 7-8 hours in the car, and we had to go to a ticket reseller in New Jersey, and we spent $35 on these tickets, which folks at Air are like, wow, that's a great deal. It's like, in 1980, $35 on a ticket was like spending, $250 on a ticket today. Who did you go with? Was it the other guys in Anthrax? Was it just somebody? Did you go with your mom? Who did you go to the show with?
So I went with a group of friends, but leading up to this, there's a whole other chapter to this story.
All right, let's hear it.
We knew, so back in like 70, 77, around that time, me and two friends of mine went to get tickets for a Kiss show, and just on a hunch, we went down to Rocksteady Management, Aucoin Management, which was on Madison Avenue in Manhattan. We had just gotten tickets, and I was young at the time, really young. They were a bit older, and we waited outside of Aucoin Management for a bit, and Paul Stanley came walking up, and true story, Paul invited us up to Rocksteady, up to Aucoin Management in the elevator. We got out of the elevator. There was a receptionist there, and right there was that jukebox that Paul did an interview for. I believe it was 2020 special. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. And I've been to those Aucoin Management offices. That's where I did my Gene Simmons interview back in 1980.
That's awesome. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely.
Then. And Paul got us 3 pictures, 3 8x10s, and assigned them for each one of us. And he was wearing a wig at the time because he was still trying to protect his, the mystique of Kiss at the time. So it was one of the greatest days of my life at that point. I remember going home and showing all my friends, and it was a great thing. And then that started to become a thing that we started to do. And we got to see Gene a couple of times and Ace. So let's go fast forward now.
Let me just ask you one question about
Peter
that.
Leaves.
But were you just hanging out as fans, and they invited you up just as, hey, I'm being nice to a fan? Okay, so it wasn't a musician thing. You weren't Charlie Benante of anything at that time. You were just
No.
That's actually kind of cool that they would do that, because you would think, especially in the mid 70s when they were at the height of their popularity, that they would just blow you off and say, "Ugh, call security, get these kids out of here." So that's actually a very cool story. But let's fast forward.
He invited the three of us upstairs, and we had a conversation. He signed pictures for us, and that was it. And it was, like I said, it was just such a great experience. Okay, so Peter leaves the band, and we had these mutual friends who knew Kiss very well at the time, and they were doing auditions at a rehearsal place way down in the city near the Village. And we went, and I remember sitting in like this waiting room with all these other drummers, and I was like 15 at the time. And they said, "You're too young to try it out." And they were there. Kiss was there. They were rehearsing. They were auditioning drummers. And it was another crazy experience. And then I remember going down again, seeing them, and saw Eric. And then Eric was chosen, and that was it. It was like, wow. It was a crazy time.
That's very. So,
and they were going to do a show.
But at this rehearsal, at these rehearsals, did you actually get to hear them jam the songs with like drummer X, Y, and Z? Oh wow.
Yes, we heard. We heard like some rehearsing going on. I didn't know if it was Eric at the time or another drummer at the time. And then we went down again, and there was nobody like waiting there. And like I said, that's when I saw Eric for the first time. And Eric was totally cool.
Well,
and he said,
no security, nothing. No, they let these random fans hang out. That's actually very cool of them.
John Hart was there, and another guy, George Sawit, was there, I believe.
Look at that! It's the rock royalty of Kiss hanging out. So when was this rehearsal that you saw? Was this in June of 1980, or was this 1979? Where I mean, it can't be 79. There was a Dynasty tour, but so what month was this? Where these rehearsals going on?
It was definitely like May, June, because it was warm out. I remember that. And I mean, eventually we had to leave. We had to go downstairs outside. But but yeah, we were up there, and they were totally amazing. And at that point, they would come out, and there was just a small group of us out there, and they would talk, and they said, meet our new drummer here. And, Eric was there, and Eric was very quiet, and it was awesome. And then we heard that they were going to do a show, and we were so excited about it.
Now, when they're hanging out and you're meeting Eric, were they in costume? No, probably not, right? They were all barefaced? No. Wow.
No.
Any pictures of that?
They were all... No, I don't have any pictures at that point.
Damn it.
I wish I did. But like I said, there were these girls who used to hang with Kiss, and they were called the Kissettes, and we knew them. And they were also there that day.
So maybe a picture somewhere exists now. So that's interesting that you say that it was warm weather, because, I interviewed Gene, like I said, on June 9th, 1980. And at the time I asked him, I said, do you have a new drummer? He goes, yes, but we're not ready to announce it. And of course the show was like 6 weeks later. So it amazes me that in May, perhaps, they still didn't have a drummer, or they were still whittling down the list to get the guy. That's kind of fascinating that it was that close.
That seems more realistic, because the weather was nice.
Now, of course, the weather in New York probably gets nice around, end of March, early April. But still, it's amazing that they went from, the Dynasty tour, Peter leaving, and this Palladium show all within... I saw them August of 79 in Montreal, and the Dynasty tour went, till December or something? So in that 7-month period, they got a new guy, auditioned a new guy, got a new character, got new makeup. When you look at the timeline, it's actually kind of spectacular what they were able to do in 6 months,
Well, exactly. And you think about it, they also put a record out.
Yeah, well, yes, but they had Anton help them.
So
but yeah,
right,
you're right.
They had Anton, but I'm saying they knew this was going on, and they were still trying to be, business as usual, which was great. They didn't want to lose any momentum, though. I think Peter leaving had more of an impact than they really thought it would have.
Though, now from in the 2020 perspective, when we read about what was going on, before the Kiss movie and the Dynasty tour and Anton being on Dynasty, I think that perhaps the perception by, January of 1980 is like, Peter checked out 3 years ago, so changing him's not going to be such a big upheaval. But for fans, of course, who didn't know all of this stuff going on, it was a big upheaval. So, all right, we get to July 25th at the Palladium, and the Rockettes, I believe, open. I have pictures of this somewhere. What was your impression of the band? I mean, for me, coming from Montreal, I was still 11 years old at the time. I'm in New York. I'm in a venue. It's big. It's scary. It's New York City. There was a whole lot of other stuff going on than just Kiss. But for you, who born and raised there, you're just going to another show, no big deal. What was that like when they're not playing Madison Square Garden, and they're in the little tiny club, and they come out and you look at the drums and you see this massive drum kit, and it's not Peter? What was sort of your first impressions?
Well, I knew Eric, was going to be the drummer, but I was pretty excited about it, to be honest with you. I thought that everything looked massive, and they were in Kiss fashion, still going big or go home. And when they came on the stage, dude, I was fucking excited. I couldn't. It bothered me that Peter wasn't there, but I kind of welcomed Eric a bit more than maybe other people did.
When you heard his live drumming, and listen, in 2020 you're Charlie Benante of Anthrax, and you play a mean power drum. You bash like no other guy bashes. What was it like for you at that time, at 15 or 16, hearing, going from the swinging, jazzy Peter Criss stuff to this guy who came out and pounded Detroit Rock City, pounded Cold Gin, pounded Strutter? What was sort of your impressions when, did your ears perk up? Did you go, ooh, listen to that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely, because he was doing more in the song than Peter had done. And yeah, this is the other part that's a little weird, but Peter's drumming in the past 2 years, or when I saw the Dynasty tour, it wasn't the old Peter. It was a little strange. It was more subdued, it wasn't that guy. It wasn't that cat back there anymore. He was just maybe his lives were just took its toll on him, and he was down to his last one. It just wasn't exciting anymore. And it was, when I saw them the second time on the Dynasty run, or maybe it was the third time, and they had Judas Priest opening for them, Judas Priest completely won me over that night.
What a great band to see opening for Kiss. I got New England, which wasn't so bad, but you said
that was first. That was the first.
Yeah, that was in August, and I guess that would have been July for you. I'm assuming you saw them at Madison Square, right? So that would have been July for you.
Yeah, I went both nights.
Right. But you said something interesting there. You said that Eric was doing a lot more within the song. Is that something that you as a drummer practices, where it's important to get more out of the instrument, and you're doing a whatever song, an Anthrax song, whatever, and is it important to have more parts, more fills, more cymbals, more this? Or was there a certain elegance to Peter's more open air, laid back kind of style? How do you sort of see the drumming thing?
I think Eric completely, maybe those guys told him, dude, do what you want. If you want to add a double kick in Detroit Rock City, do it. You know what I mean? Just go for it. Maybe they were looking for something new too. And I think Eric really gave them the kick too that they all needed, because I thought Eric's playing on the next album was fucking awesome.
When we go back to history, the Elder drum sound was certainly something to listen to. But when you get to Creatures of the Night, that's sort of like the ultimate sound, right? That's the one that everybody wants to have, So,
I think that record really put Eric on the map. He's the new drummer in Kiss, but I think Creatures of the Night definitely showed everyone he's not just a replacement. He is, something to listen to and look to, And I really think he stepped it up, and I think Eric's character really started to come out, and especially in a lot of those songs too. He definitely drove those songs.
Well, yeah. Listen, you can say what you want about "I Love It Loud," but ultimately, it's a drum song. If you take out that boom,
it's a drum
boom,
song,
100%. Just quickly, I, at my age now, have seen somewhere around 50 Kiss shows, give or take. I think I'm at 47 or something. I'm assuming that you, in the position you're in, you've probably seen somewhere around the same, if not a lot more. How do you look back on this? Because for me, there's 3 shows. The first show in 1979, you'll never top that. That was the first memory, the first encounter, the first love. The Unmasked show is hard to top because it's Kiss in a club with a new drummer. And then, of course, the reunion tour show in Detroit. You know, massive stadium, the 4 guys are back. You're not going to beat that. But for you, how does this show stack up in the ones you've seen?
The first time I saw Kiss was at the end of 1976. And it was the first time I'm seeing them in front of me. And it was like an out-of-body experience. One song would finish, and I didn't have time to even absorb what I just saw. And then the next song would come on, and I'd be back into that, trance. I just remember looking at my sister, because she took me, and she knew, like, he's fucking enjoying this, because it was the thing that I've looked forward to for so long, and here I am. I'm there seeing it for the first time, and it was definitely an experience that I'll never forget. Your first time doing anything, but especially seeing the band that you love, and you have pictures of them everywhere in your room. It's just it's it's a moment in time.
Oh, it really
so
is.
That first experience was great.
Oh, you're not going to beat the first one. Are you surprised to learn all these years later that there's no recording of this? That it's not videotaped? I mean, you would have thought somewhere along the line, the first show with Eric Carr would make a great live release.
You would think, and like, is it true? Or I thought there had to be something. I mean, every time you see something that's Palladium related, it's not the Palladium, it's that Australian show or something, which was awesome, that the show in Australia. But I thought Kiss was definitely on the road. I thought that was the kick that they needed, but it just didn't go that way. And then I guess they were kind of forced a couple of years later to just take off the makeup and try and reinvent the wheel.
And they did somewhat successfully here. And I'll just end on this. Kiss in the 80s with Bon Jovi and Def Leppard and all those bands and that sort of hair metal thing becoming very popular, Kiss sort of tried to follow along. But do you think we actually got to hear Eric Carr's potential? Had Kiss gone in and done sort of a Diary of a Madman Aussie record with massive guitars in 1986 instead of, whatever, Asylum, do you think we would have heard more from Eric? Do you think he was sort of throttled or held back, or he did what he had to do?
That's a good question, because I don't know how much freedom Eric was given at that point to expand his style. Or, I mean, when you would go see them during those tours, Eric did a massive drum solo, which showcased his playing. But I still think his best playing is on The Elder and on Creatures of the Night.
That's an interesting perspective. I mean, everybody talks about Creatures of the Night, but nobody ever says his best playing is on The Elder. I guess I'm going to have to go back and re-listen specifically to his drum tracks on that, because I don't know about you, but I remember that first time I opened The Elder and stuck it on the vinyl, on the record player, and I just went, oh, what's this? And that feeling of, oh, yeah, right. You know what I'm talking about. That feeling has never escaped me 40 years later, or whatever, 38 years later.
But there's songs on that record, especially The Oath, where Eric's playing is awesome. I mean, he's doing this fast double kick, which for back then, that wasn't really, common. And I thought, my original thought on The Elder was, this is Kiss trying to be Pink Floyd, The Wall. And I just think that there's great songs on that too. I just think the production didn't sound like Kiss, which is something that always bothered me about them. Like, Destroyer didn't sound like Kiss, but Rock and Roll Over sounds like Kiss.
Well, listen, we can have a long debate about Bob Ezrin, and I love Bob as a producer, but I've always said that Bob makes Bob Ezrin solo albums, and it's like, Bob Ezrin presents Welcome to My Nightmare featuring Alice Cooper. Bob Ezrin makes Destroyer featuring Kiss. and
yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Right? And it's great that he does that, but it bothers me that you get to Destroyer and you've got Steve Hunter on there, and you've got Dick Wagner on there, and you've got choirs, and you've got his kids, and you get to Alice Cooper and Welcome to My Nightmare, and he's got Prakash John, and he's got a whole bunch. All of a sudden these records become 87 people, and you're like, but I like the four guys. Can we just have the four guys? So, but anyway,
I'll tell you a funny story about Bob Ezrin. We played L.A. We were playing the Palladium in L.A. and Snake from Skid Row came down and he brought Bob with him, Bob Ezrin. And I had never met Bob Ezrin before, and I was completely excited to meet Bob Ezrin, because back in the 70s, people like Bob Ezrin, Eddie Kramer, Roy Thomas Baker, these were producers who I read their names on many records and respected everything that they've done. So I had just finished reading this article about The Wall, and it was a pretty big article, and they really went deep into it. They said that some of the Pink Floyd members didn't play on certain songs, and we know that some of the Beach Boys did background vocals on that too. So I immediately asked him about this report, that the story that I read, and he immediately lit up like, that is absolutely untrue. I don't know where that came from, but I can totally tell you that Nick Mason is on every one of those songs. And I'm like, okay, dude, just telling you what I read. So to me, it's like, I don't know if Ace was intimidated back during the Destroyer thing, and that's why he didn't show up, or he just didn't show up because he was fucked up and had to go to a card game, you know?
Yeah, you know, I don't know, but I'm just looking at, like, even the most recent Alice Cooper ones, you know, Welcome to My Nightmare 2 and all this. Alice got this great band with Nita Strauss and Tommy and Ryan and all that, and then they go into the studio with Bob, and he replaces everybody, and it's like, oh, come on, just give us the band, the people that are going to be on stage performing these songs. Give us those guys and girls. You know, but anyway.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like,
absolutely. If they're good enough on stage, then
yes. Yeah.
track them.
I mean, can you imagine, you know, Anthrax goes in to make a record and we find out, oh, Charlie did everything and only Joey is singing, but Charlie did the leads and Charlie did the rhythms and Charlie did the drums and Frank wasn't available, so Charlie did the bass. You'd be like, well, then it's not an Anthrax record. It's just a record. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And anyway, on that, always a pleasure. And that Palladium show, like I've said, for me, it was the second show I've ever seen. My first two shows were Kiss, you know, hey, thank the Lord. And it just went from great to better. You know, August of '79 at the Forum, you see that stuff, and the guys come out from under the ground, and it was just fantastic. And then to see that second show at 11 years old in New York City, I mean, it's the city, right? I mean, it's you can talk about Montreal and Toronto and Moscow or whatever, but New York is the city. Just great memories, and great memories for you.
Great memories, and I did something with Mark Weiss a couple of weeks back about his book that came out. We did like a Zoom thing, and the first time I ever met Mark Weiss was at that show, and he was there with, of all people, Matt Dillon, the actor at the time, and I remember seeing Mark in front of the Palladium, hanging with Matt Dillon, and I recognized Mark from like Circus Magazine. I ran right over to him and said, "You're Mark Weiss," and he was like, "Yep," and he gave me a new copy of Circus Magazine that was about to come out, and he's like, "I remember that show, and I remember that day and walking with Matt Dillon." So it was pretty funny. Like all the people that I know till this day, some of them were actually there.
You know what? My mom took a whole bunch of pictures of me standing outside the Palladium. I'm going to go dig these out right now. I'm going to go see if I can see Mark Weiss or you or Matt Dillon, because we have a bunch of pictures of me standing in line at the Palladium with whoever was standing next to me. So, you know, that'd be kind of funny to see like Mark Weiss, you know, photo bombing me from 40 years. Oh, that's great. Well, anyway, what a great show. And by the way, that book that Mark put out, The Decade That Rocked, I think it's believed. The Decade That Rocked, I think it's called.
Yeah.
That is a phenomenal book. If you're a fan, and we're going to plug Mark right now, but if you're a fan, go buy that book. And in fact, buy two, because you probably have a friend who's going to come over to your house, look at it and say, damn, I want one of those. And you can just give them one. So buy two. It's a great book.
Yeah. It's a great book. It's like definitely brings you back to a time that was so great for rock fans. And I often say people who are rock fans nowadays are totally, man, it's not, I'm not going to say it's the worst time to be a rock fan, but those times was a great time, man, because it just, that book encompasses everything that was about it, you know?
Yes, and like it or not, most of us had those pictures, Mark's pictures. You know, there was three. There was Weiss, there was Halfin, and
Ross.
Who's the other guy I'm thinking of? The guy who was on the West Coast. Nick? No, not anyway. But those three.
So you had Niels Lozauer.
That's the guy. Niels Lozauer. That's the guy. The West Coast guy, right?
Yeah. You had Halfin, you had Mark Weiss, and of course there's other photographers too,
Right.
like the Gene Ambos, the God, now everybody else is
Right.
leaving me. But
the point is,
there were
those
some great
three
people.
Those three were in every single, whether you bought Metal Edge or Circus or Hit Parader or Groove or Cream, those guys, they were everywhere. And so the pictures they took are the stories that are in my head, right? When I think back to 19 whatever, I see a Mark Weiss picture, or I see a Zlozauer picture, or I see a Halfin picture. And they were as important as the actual albums and the actual concerts and the actual music, because they are the visual history of that time.
Absolutely. And Mark is also responsible for a lot of album covers, ours being one. I'm the Man cover. He did, of course, the Bon Jovi. He did the Twisted Sister, Cinderella. I mean, Mark was not only, a guy who had pictures in magazines, he did album covers too. And which I think stands the test of time, because it definitely is a moment in time when you look at these album covers.
Listen, absolutely. And on my Twitter, I do all this on this day stuff, and I deal with these albums.
I love that.
Thank you, by the way. But I deal with these album covers daily, and they're just iconic. You think of Slippery When Wet, and you go, wow, it's a garbage bag with water on it. But you know what? That album cover, whatever it is now, 36 years later, 35, everybody knows what Slippery When Wet looks like. Can't deny
Absolutely.
that. Twisted Sister album, everybody knows what it looks like. And it's as iconic as We're Not Gonna Take It, or as Living on a Prayer. You can't think of Living on a Prayer without thinking of the album cover. And that's Mark. Mark is brilliant.
Mark is brilliant. He is.
Anyway, sir, thank you for this today, and I will share and send you these links when available. But folks, that Palladium show, if you weren't there, man, you missed something. And if you were, you know exactly what me and Charlie were talking about today. It is just a moment in time that will never be forgotten.
Yeah, well, exactly. It was definitely a moment in time, and it's part of my mental hard drive.
Thank you, sir. Let me just turn this off.
Here's Paul Stanley to tell you why he doesn't want to shake your hand.
Some people might have a little rock and roll pneumonia.
Ugh, not even cold gin will kill those germs. This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon.